The phone wouldn't stop vibrating on the conference table, buzzing like a small, angry insect trapped under glass. A half-drunk Starbucks cup sat near the edge, the ice melted into a sad brown puddle that kept creeping toward a stack of signature pages. In the reflection of the black screen at the front of the room, Dana Brooks looked like someone watching her own life from the outside. Her hands were steady, but her jaw was locked so tight it hurt. The pen was already uncapped. The investors on the video call were smiling like the hard part was over. The Arabic version of the contract was clipped to the English one, bound together like a promise. A promise that had just turned heavy. Because the young woman sitting quietly near the door had cleared her throat and said, in a calm voice that didn't match the room's speed, "I'm sorry, but that sentence doesn't say what you think it says." Dana had built her career in Chicago the way people build a wall in a storm, brick by brick, hoping it would hold. She grew up in a small Indiana town where the biggest company was a packaging plant and the biggest dream was leaving. Now, at 39, she was the CEO of a clean energy logistics startup called Riverline, which sounded gentle but ran like a machine. She lived in a high-rise near the river, a place with a doorman who knew her name and a gym she never used. Her calendar was always full, her inbox always angry, and her sleep always a little short. The deal on the table wasn't just a business win. It was survival dressed up as a victory. Riverline had big contracts but thin margins. A year ago, a supply chain hiccup had turned into a cash bleed. A month ago, her board started using phrases like strategic alternatives, which sounded polite but felt like a hand on the back of her neck. This deal was with Al Noor Holdings, a Gulf-based group expanding into U.S. infrastructure. The number was huge. $500 million in staged investment, long-term partnerships, new routes, new warehouses. It would quiet the board. It would calm the staff. It would buy Dana time to breathe. But time was the one thing she had never known how to hold without squeezing it. Her personal life had become a series of postponed conversations. Her mom called and Dana let it go to voicemail because she couldn't handle the sadness in her mother's voice after Dad's retirement got messy and lonely. Her younger brother texted her photos of his kids and she reacted with a heart because it was easier than writing back. She had dated a man named Miles for almost a year, a good man who cooked actual dinners and said things like, "You don't have to earn rest," but Dana didn't know how to be with someone who asked her to slow down. He stopped calling 3 months ago. She told herself it was fine. She told herself a lot of things were fine. The morning of the signing, she had woken up before her alarm and stared at the ceiling while the city outside her window turned from dark to gray. She checked her bank app out of habit, not because she needed to, but because numbers made her feel in control. She watched the market open, watched a competitor's stock bump up on rumors, and she felt that old, familiar pressure behind her eyes. The kind that came when the world expected a version of her that never got tired. At Riverline's office, the floors smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. The cleaning crew came in after midnight, when the office turned quiet and the lights dimmed. Dana rarely saw them. She knew they existed the way she knew air conditioning existed. Necessary, invisible, easy to forget until something stopped working. Rosa had been part of that crew for 3 years. Dana didn't know that, not really. She knew the name because it was on an email once when HR updated vendor badges. Rosa was short and quick, with a soft voice and a back that hurt more than she admitted. She worked nights because her life was built around what her daughter needed. Her daughter, Layla, was 22 and commuting to a community college outside the city while working weekends at a grocery store. Layla was the kind of young adult who always looked like she was thinking 2 steps ahead, not because she was arrogant, but because she didn't have the luxury of being careless. That day, Rosa had come in early because the office needed to be spotless for the signing photos. Dana's head of operations had asked for extra polish, like money could be reflected in shine. Rosa brought Layla with her because Layla had class later and their buses lined up better if she waited in the city. Layla sat near the break area with a textbook open, earbuds in, trying to disappear. Dana first noticed them only because she walked out of the conference room to take a call and almost ran into Rosa's cart. Rosa stepped back fast, apologizing in Spanish. Dana lifted a hand, distracted, and said, "It's fine." Then her phone buzzed again and she was gone, her heels clicking down the hallway like a countdown. Back in the conference room, the legal teams had been moving fast. The American attorneys did the part they knew how to do: track changes, red lines, signatures, smiles. The representatives from Al Noor were professional and warm, wearing suits that fit perfectly and expressions that never showed panic. They insisted on having both English and Arabic versions signed, for clarity, and Dana's team agreed because it felt normal for an international deal. A translator had been hired, a credentialed professional, and he spoke fluent Arabic and smooth English. Dana trusted the process the way executives trust processes, because trust was easier than admitting you couldn't personally verify everything. But the translator had been on calls all week. He looked tired. He kept checking his watch. He was paid to keep things moving, and he did. When the final draft printed, a page got clipped at the back. Dana's general counsel, Peter, flipped through and nodded. "Standard protections," he said. "We're good." Dana wanted to believe him. She wanted to sign so badly she could taste it. Then, right before the pens came out, Layla walked in. She didn't enter like someone trying to cause trouble. She walked in the way people walk into a room when they have something true and they don't know how it will land. Her eyes went to the Arabic pages. She stared for a second, like her brain was zooming in. She took a breath. "I'm sorry," she said, voice small but steady. "Can I say something?" Dana looked at her like she was a glitch. Peter frowned. One of the investors' faces on the screen tightened. Layla held up a hand, not dramatic, just honest. "My mom cleans here. I'm waiting for class. I grew up speaking Arabic at home. I wasn't trying to listen. I just saw the pages." She swallowed. "That line about operational discretion, isn't that in Arabic? It's different. It's like you're agreeing that they can change your service pricing model without your approval, if they say it's needed for market conditions." The room went quiet in a way that felt physical. Dana's heart didn't race. It dropped. Like an elevator cable had snapped and her stomach was trying to catch up. She stared at the sentence Layla pointed to. Dana couldn't read the Arabic, but she could read the shape of a disaster. She looked at the translator, and for the first time all week, his eyes flickered. Not guilt exactly. Something closer to discomfort. Peter opened his mouth, then shut it, then said, "That can't be right." Layla didn't argue. She just said, "I might be wrong. But if I'm not, that's not a small thing." Dana felt the entire deal wobble on a single sentence. $500 million, balanced on a line of ink. And under that fear, something else rose up, quieter and harder to name. Shame. Not because a young woman corrected them. Shame because Dana realized how close she'd come to signing something she didn't fully understand. Shame because she'd been so hungry to be saved by a deal that she'd stopped acting like the person who built a company from nothing. Dana set her pen down. The plastic made a soft sound against the table, but it landed like a decision. She looked at Layla and said, carefully, "Show me." And just like that, the room that had been racing toward a celebration turned into a place where the truth finally had space to speak. The room didn't explode into chaos the way Dana half expected. It went still instead. The kind of still that made every small sound feel loud. The of the event. The faint buzz from the investor call that hadn't been muted yet. Someone shifting in a chair. Dana slid her chair back and stood, not because she wanted authority, but because sitting suddenly felt wrong. She motioned to the empty seat near the table. "Come here," she said to Layla, her voice calm in a way she didn't feel. "Please." Layla hesitated. She glanced at her mother through the glass wall. Rosa stood frozen in the hallway, hands clenched around the cleaning cart handle, fear written plainly on her face. Dana noticed it then.
Not abstract fear.
Not the kind you read about. The kind that comes from knowing one wrong move can cost you rent, groceries, stability. Dana made a choice without announcing it. She stepped to the door, opened it, and spoke quietly to Rosa. "You're not in trouble. I promise." Rosa nodded, not fully convinced, but it was enough to let Layla sit down. Dana pushed the Arabic pages across the table toward her. "Walk us through it," she said. Not as a command. As a request.
Layla leaned forward. Her hands shook just a little.
She took a breath and started translating line by line, not fast, not dramatic. Just careful. As she spoke, the shape of the problem came into focus. The English version talked about flexibility. The Arabic version talked about authority. Not hidden in legal poetry. Just different enough to tilt power quietly, over time, in a way that wouldn't show up until it was too late. Peter's face went pale. The translator tried to explain. He said it was a cultural phrasing issue. He said it was standard. He said no one intended harm. Dana listened, but something inside her had already shifted. She muted the investor call. The silence that followed was heavy and private. Dana thanked Layla. Not with a big speech.
Just 2 words.
"Thank you." And she meant it in a way that surprised even her. The deal was paused. Lawyers went into a separate room. Calls were made. Smiles disappeared. What had been a sure thing turned into a question mark. The Al-Noor representative stayed polite, but the warmth cooled.
Dana could feel it.
She had chosen friction over comfort, and there would be a cost. When it was clear that nothing more would happen that afternoon, Dana walked back into the hallway. Rosa was packing up her supplies with quick, nervous movements. Dana stopped beside her. "You raised a smart daughter," Dana said. Rosa looked down, embarrassed.
She listens.
Layla hovered nearby, unsure if she should disappear again. Dana surprised herself by saying, "Can I buy you coffee?" It came out awkward, like she hadn't practiced being human in a while. "Both of you. If you have time." They did. They sat in a small cafe down the block, the kind with uneven tables and a chalkboard menu that hadn't been updated in months. Dana ordered out of habit, then realized she didn't even want the drink. She watched the steam rise and disappear. Rosa talked about work, about night shifts and sore hands. Layla talked about school, about how she wanted to work in international business someday, not because she loved money, but because she'd grown up watching contracts decide people's lives without them being in the room. Dana listened more than she spoke. It felt strange. Liberating.
Uncomfortable.
At one point, Layla said, carefully, "I almost didn't say anything. I didn't want to cause trouble." Dana nodded. "I almost signed something that would have hurt my company and my people. Silence would have caused more trouble." That sentence stayed with Dana longer than the meeting had. That night, alone in her apartment, Dana replayed the day while reheating leftovers she barely tasted. She thought about how close she'd come to letting desperation drive her. How easy it was to trust systems instead of people. How rarely she looked beyond titles. Her phone buzzed. A text from Miles, of all people. Just one line. "Saw your company in the news."
Hope you're okay.
She stared at it for a long time. Didn't answer. The next few days were tense. The board wasn't happy. The investors asked hard questions. Al-Noor requested revisions and additional meetings. The deal didn't die, but it didn't move forward either. Dana felt like she was holding her breath at work and exhaling only when she was alone. She found herself thinking about Layla at odd moments. About how courage sometimes looks quiet. About how intelligence doesn't always come with credentials printed on letterhead. On Friday night, as Dana stayed late reviewing cash flow projections, she heard the familiar sound of cleaning carts again. She looked up this time. Rosa smiled, tentative. Dana smiled back. "You don't have to stay so late," Rosa said, half joking.
Dana shrugged.
"Old habit." Rosa nodded like she understood more than Dana expected. Layla wasn't there that night.
Dana felt a small, unexpected disappointment.
Over the weekend, Dana did something she hadn't done in years. She walked the city without headphones. She noticed people. A couple arguing quietly on a bench. A man crying in his car before turning the engine off. A woman laughing into her phone like it was oxygen. She realized how insulated her life had become. How success had narrowed her world instead of expanding it. On Monday, Dana asked HR to look into internship programs that weren't just for elite schools. She didn't announce it as a big initiative. She just asked questions. On Tuesday, she invited Layla to sit in on a non-confidential strategy meeting as a paid consultant. Layla almost said no.
Dana insisted.
"I don't need you to impress anyone," Dana said. "I need you to be honest." Layla smiled, nervous but proud. Dana didn't know where any of this would lead. The deal was still uncertain. Her personal life was still quiet. Nothing had magically fixed itself. But something had cracked open. And for the first time in a long while, Dana felt like she wasn't waiting to be saved by a signature. She was paying attention again. The first real crack didn't come during a board meeting or a tense call with overseas lawyers. It came late on a Wednesday night, when Dana was alone in her office, staring at a spreadsheet she had already reviewed 3 times. The numbers weren't lying, but they weren't comforting either. Cash runway, burn rate, delayed investment. Every cell felt like a reminder that confidence could evaporate quietly, without drama. She leaned back in her chair and rubbed her eyes. The city outside the window glowed in a way that usually energized her. Tonight, it just felt far away. Her phone buzzed.
Her motor again.
Dana let it ring, then surprised herself by answering before it stopped. "Hi," her mom said, voice cautious, like she was stepping onto thin ice. "Hey, Mom." They talked about small things. The weather. A neighbor's dog. How her dad was doing now that he wasn't working. Then there was a pause, long enough to feel intentional. "You sound tired," her mom said.
Dana almost laughed.
Instead, her throat tightened. "I am." There was no advice. No fixing.
Just quiet understanding.
When the call ended, Dana sat there longer than she needed to. She realized how much effort she'd spent pretending she didn't need anyone. The pressure at work kept building. The revised deal terms from Al Noor came back more aggressive. Not hostile, but firm. They wanted control disguised as partnership. Dana saw it clearly now. Clearer than she ever had before. And seeing clearly made the decision harder, not easier. Peter warned her gently. Walking away has consequences. So does signing, Dana said.
The board split.
Some trusted her instinct. Some didn't. One member asked, "Are you letting pride get in the way?" That question followed her home. She thought about Layla, sitting quietly in meetings, offering insights without ego. About Rosa, working through the night without complaint. About the employees who believed Riverline stood for something more than speed and scale. Dana wondered when she'd stopped trusting herself unless numbers backed her up.
The breaking point came the next afternoon.
Layla was in Dana's office, reviewing notes from a call. She hesitated, then said, "Can I ask something?" "You don't have to answer." Dana nodded. "Why does this deal matter so much to you? I mean, I know it's big, but it feels personal." Dana opened her mouth with a practiced answer about growth and stability. It didn't come out. What came out instead was quieter. Because if it fails, Dana said, it feels like I fail. The words hung between them. Layla didn't rush to respond. She just said, that sounds heavy. Dana looked away, embarrassed by the honesty. I built this company because I was afraid of being stuck. Afraid of needing someone.
Afraid of ending up small.
Layla nodded slowly. My mom cleans offices because she didn't have choices. But she's not small.
Dana felt something shift again.
Not relief. Recognition. That night, Dana walked into her apartment and didn't turn on the lights. She sat on the couch and let the dark settle. She thought about Miles, about how he'd asked her once what she was running toward. She hadn't had an answer then. She wasn't sure she had one now. She opened her email and drafted a message to Al Noor. It was professional, calm, clear. It stated that Riverline would not proceed under terms that compromised long-term autonomy. It invited continued discussion but set firm boundaries. Her finger hovered over send. She thought about the board's disappointment. The headlines that wouldn't happen. The quiet panic of payroll if things went wrong. She also thought about the moment Layla spoke up. About how close she'd come to signing away control out of fear. Dana sent the email. The response came faster than she expected.
Not acceptance. Not rejection.
Just acknowledgement. The deal was officially in limbo. The board meeting the next day was tense. One member resigned. Another warned that Dana was betting the company on integrity. Dana didn't argue. She owned it. After the meeting, she walked through the office. People were working, laughing softly, complaining about the printer. Life went on. Rosa was cleaning nearby. Dana stopped. I might have just made things harder, Dana said, more to herself than anyone. Rosa looked at her and said, hard doesn't mean wrong. That night, Dana went home exhausted in a way that felt different. Honest. She didn't know how things would turn out. She just knew she hadn't betrayed herself. For the first time in years, she slept without checking her phone. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in small waves, the way real consequences usually do. 2 weeks after Dana sent the email, Riverline lost a mid-sized client who decided to wait and see. A month later, a trade publication ran a lukewarm piece about the stalled deal, framing it as hesitation instead of restraint. Dana read it on her phone while standing in line for coffee, the barista calling out names like nothing in the world had shifted. Inside her, things had shifted. But not cleanly. Not neatly. She still woke up some mornings with a tight chest and a reflex to check her email before her feet hit the floor. She still felt the board's eyes on her, measuring, recalculating. She still wondered if she'd been brave or just stubborn. But something quieter had settled in too. Layla's consulting role turned into a short-term contract. She wasn't flashy. She didn't dominate meetings. She asked questions that slowed people down just enough to notice what they were assuming. Dana watched executives twice her age rethink their positions because a young woman with no fancy title had calmly asked, "Why does it have to be this way?" Dana started doing something radical for herself. She stopped filling every silence. She let meetings end early. She left the office before midnight more than once. One evening, she ran into Rosa in the lobby as Rosa was clocking out. Dana was heading home too, coat on, laptop bag lighter than usual.
You look different, Rosa said, smiling.
Dana considered that. I think I feel different. They walked out together. The air was cool, the city restless but familiar. The deal didn't come back the way it had been. It came back smaller, more cautious. 6 months later, a revised partnership emerged with a different regional firm, less money up front, fewer strings.
No ta headline ideal.
but a sustainable one.
Riverline adjusted.
Tightened. Learned. The board stabilized. Not everyone stayed. The ones who did trusted Dana more than before, not because she'd won big, but because she'd been willing to lose honestly. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Dana finally replied to Miles. They met for coffee, talked without trying to fix the past. There was no dramatic reunion. Just warmth. Respect. Closure that didn't hurt as much as she'd feared. Dana called her mother more often. Not with updates. Just to listen. One night, alone in her apartment, Dana stood by the window and watched the river move through the city, steady and unremarkable. She thought about the version of herself who believed success meant never needing help, never being wrong, never slowing down. She smiled, small and tired and real. The biggest lesson hadn't come from the deal or the risk or the near miss. It came from paying attention. From realizing that worth isn't proven by signatures or silence, but by the courage to stop when something feels wrong and the humility to listen when the truth comes from an unexpected place. Dana turned off the lights and went to bed knowing tomorrow would still be uncertain. But it would be hers.